Some contactees have described ET ships moving into solid rock as if it weren't there. That would be particularly useful on a future Earth. Here are a few incidents. Preston Dennett writes that when a contactee named Joe was 8 years old, he was offered a ride on a ship by a human-looking ET. The ET let 8-year-old Joe pilot the ship, and Joe immediately crashed the craft into the ground and kept going. Hearing that makes you wonder why an ET would let an 8-year-old drive a spaceship. In any event, Joe described it this way. I could see the rocks. We were passing through the rocks, and there were all these sparks flying, dirt, everything. Dennett describes another similar incident, this time by Pat. As she looked on in surprise, the ship drove at high speed straight into a rock wall. Hitting with a bang, it moved right through the rock and entered a hidden ET base deep within the mountain. Seeing Pat's surprise, the ET said, "What is an obstacle for you is not an obstacle for us." Frank had several similar experiences of ET ships flying through solid rock into hidden bases. The ETs explained to him that as the ship moves into contact with the rock, they take apart the atoms ahead of it and reassemble them behind it. In another case, Frank saw the process up close when he was inside one of the ET bases. One of the ETs invited him over to watch. The dark-haired ET held up a handheld device and pointed it at one of the rock walls. When he activated it, a huge round hole appeared in the rock in front. There was no heat, no light, and no apparent radiation. Frank leaned closer to look down the tunnel. It extended a long way into the rock wall. So far that the end was in darkness. Frank was tempted to call it a ray gun, like a space movie. But it didn't look like a gun, and no rays came out. Frank was amazed and asked, "How does it do that?" The ET smiled and replied, "It's simple. There are two ways. This device teleports the atoms somewhere else. With the other method, we have devices that take the atoms apart." ET ships can also repel solid matter. Cooper claims that when he was at the Roswell crash site, some kind of magnetic field had pushed all the Earth away from the craft at impact. Howard Menger mentioned that if the ET ships are on a collision course with a meteor when they are in space, the ship's anti-gravity flux can repel the meteor. Alternately, they can simply dematerialize the meteor by taking apart its atoms or teleport it somewhere else. When this technology is available Earth, there will be no more airplane or automobile collisions and no more falling off ladders, among a lot of other benefits. Howard Menger described seeing ETs use anti-gravity to float or glide rather than walk. And Dennett reported that two contactees named Tony and John saw an ET hurrying away from them down a golf course, but it was not running, but rather, gliding through the air. Tony said, "There was no movement, no bounce, and I don't remember seeing its legs moving." The ET seemed to be using anti-gravity to effortlessly move faster than any human can run. If that technology becomes available on Earth in the future, Earthlings could just tap a device on their belts and zip along at high speed wherever they want. Also, for those Earthlings who always wanted to fly like a bird, human flight would be possible. As with John and Frank, several other contactees report that the ETs can cloak themselves. For example, Dennett wrote that a contactee named Kevin described the ET's cloaking ability, saying that if some Earth people are standing in a group, the ETs can make themselves visible to half the group and not to the other half. Invisibility would be useful for Earthlings who want to nap on the beach or enjoy nude sunbathing and don't want to be disturbed. Or become invisible so you can watch the wild animals in the woods without disturbing them. It also probably would be handy for robbing banks. Except that there won't be any to rob after the Earth changes.